So can you just tell the viewers as far as when you decided that you really wanted to play football at a higher level?
hmm Man, there's a lot to unpack on that. So I just talk about for me. I started playing football at a young age, but my favorite sport was basketball. In fact,
Mm.
when I was preteen, I told my mother I was going to go professional, but in basketball, and I was going to buy her a house, and that was my dream. And my mom, true to form, she wanted to make sure the education was at the height of everything, and make sure I had good grades. And I challenged that, and of course, true to her word, she took basketball away from me, and then that was the last time I got poor grades. Now, and I'm not going to say that I always did well in the classroom. I did just enough, especially as a young man, just to get the grades I needed to play ball, and that continued all through college. Even though I got my degree in college, I did just enough to make sure I was eligible to play. But the football dream didn't actually come to head until probably after my junior year at the University of Utah. After my junior year at the University of Utah, I was starting to get some acknowledgement nationally as one of the best receivers in the country. That year in particular, my junior year in the draft was Ike Hilliard, Riddell Anthony, Joey Kent. It was a strong draft for wide receivers. Derek Mason, I'm just trying to think of name a few. And it was a very strong draft for wide receivers. And so I was getting calls from agents and things like that. Are you coming out? You coming out? And mind you, I had graduated college already, or in line to graduate college that summer, and or that spring. And so I briefly considered coming out because to me, I was thinking this is about as good as it gets. They were ranking me or putting me in that second to fifth round range, depending on what's going on and how the draft unfolds, according to the agents I spoke with. And then I took, it was right after our bowl game. And I took some time and I thought some things through, and I said, well, if I'm projected to be as high as second round, I'm gonna go this off season, work my tail off, and maybe move up the ladder a little bit. And depending on what publication, I was anywhere from the number one rated receiver in my class to number 3, depending on who you were, and number 2 or 3 overall, depending. Well, Randy Moss was number 1 as always, as he probably should have been. And so from there, man, that's when my dream changed. That's when I thought, okay, maybe I do have a shot to go professional football, and then I worked my tail off to get there. And as far as like the head injuries and that concern, like I never really thought about that playing ball. It was, of course, back then it wasn't necessarily in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't necessarily part of the conversation as much. I think technology now is everybody, social media, it makes it more evident and more public and more popular to discuss. But if you look at the data, you look at the numbers from head injuries, football, yes, there's a lot of head injuries in football, but per capita, per athlete, soccer has just as many.
Right.
You talk about what concussions actually are, it's the rattling of the brain in the skull. You think about heading of football, you think about wrestlers getting banged up, you think about basketball players taking elbows to the head, hockey players banging up against the wall. But football being the most popular of all sports, it gets the notoriety of it, the publication of it, the one everybody shines a light on because it makes the most money, and probably rightfully so. But yeah, there's always that fear because we never know. It's like people smoke cigarettes at a young age. You don't know how that's going to affect you when you're 20, 25, let alone when you're 60 or 65. You just do it because that's what you want to do. And so, yeah, do I have some fears? Maybe, yeah, but I play wide receiver. I've had a couple concussions and, maybe I have a memory lapse, but who knows? That could have been because technology has taken over and I don't have to remember as much. I can just put it in my phone. So, and my son, who is now 9, has been playing football for the past 2 years. He's been asking me since he was 5 years old, and I tried to hold off. I was going to wait. I think my reason wasn't necessarily head injury thing. It was more or less, I know the work and what it takes to play football, being in the heat, being in those pads and things like that. And I wanted to make sure he wanted to play. And it wasn't because he was looking at my memorabilia on the wall and watching me sign autographs thinking, oh, that's what I want to do. I wanted him to really want to play football. So I let him play. He was 7 years old. or 8 years old. Excuse me, he was 8. The first year I let him play, and he enjoyed it. So I let him play again this year. He's 9, and so he just finished. He just finished his second season this fall, and it's been fun. No concussions, no head injuries or anything like that. My brother Andre Dyson also played with me at the Titans. His son's been playing since about 7 years old, and he's now 13. And and he has had a bump one time. He had a guy hit him late, and he kept him out just from precautionary reasons. He didn't have a concussion or anything, but again, understanding the game, the context of the life after, my brother held him out. And so, just being mindful of it, I would encourage parents to let kids play football. I just think there's a lot of life lessons that come from playing football in particular, and that you don't necessarily get in life just not doing anything. And I would encourage you, and just be mindful of the situation. Make sure the coaches are teaching kids properly, which most organizations across the country now are emphasizing that, and making coaches go learn proper tackling techniques, watching them how long they're practicing, watching how long they're tackling in practice. So there has been some good to come out of people's misery, as far as you mentioned, junior say-out, committing suicide. There has been some good, because it has brought awareness to it, but I don't think it's global, because I know of girls, I'm in education, I see girls soccer players with concussions. I see girl lacrosse players with concussion. I see baseball players with concussion, softball players, volleyball players get hit upside the head with the ball with a concussion. I'm seeing it not just in football. So I think it needs to be globally taught and talked about.
All right, Kevin Dyson here, number 87 from the Tennessee Titans, with, Ian McNair. You're playing with Eddie George, Frank Wycheck, obviously yourself, and the list goes on and on. It's such a great team. Coach Jeff Fisher, too. How was it like playing with all those guys, firstly, and then we'll get into those 2 games against the Bills and then the Rams?
Well, I was only in my second year when we went to the Super Bowl in 99, 2000. That was my second year. And, it was a veteran team. And the good news is, from coming to a team like that, I just had to add to and I just had to do my part. And that was the biggest thing, is making sure I wasn't the reason why we lost the game type thing. And because we had a good nucleus of guys, very good, strong leadership on both sides of the football. And once we added Javon Curse, that one little element, that game breaker on the defense side of the ball, it just clicked. And from leadership to all the way down to our newest additions on the team. And so you just feed off of that. I think most good teams feed off of leadership a lot of times. Not talking about leadership from coaching or from the administration. I'm talking about player leadership. And we had good leaders on that team on both sides of the football. So it was a fun team to be a part of. I was a focal point in the sense that I was a first-round draft pick, things of that nature. But I just kind of got to sit back and enjoy the ride. Like you mentioned, there was Steve McNair, Eddie George, Javon Curse, Amari Rowe, Blaine Bishop, Bruce Matthews, Hall of Famer. Frank Wycheck. I just kind of got to enjoy the ride and just do my part. And that was a fun year.
So go into the game. All right, so you're down, and the Bills are about to kick it off. There's what was the? I think there was about 15 to maybe
16 seconds.
16 seconds left in the game. What was it like going into the huddle? Can you describe that moment with the pass from Wycheck to you? I know there was all this time after that play, after you scored the touchdown. Was it going to count? And all this other stuff. Can you go into that whole moment in general?
Yeah, initially we were pretty much winning the whole game, and they just finally had taken the lead late there in the fourth quarter. And, as we were getting prepared to go out there, what we call our last 3 plays to try to get in position to kick a field goal to win, is what we were planning when my name was called. And Jeff Fisher and Alan Lowry, our special teams coach, they came and got me and said, "Hey, man, we're going to run home run throwback. You get in here. You go into the second return spot, and, they're going to squib it to Frank. He's going to get it. He's going to lateral it to Isaac Bird. You get in pitch relationship. You're going to run down the field. He's going to pitch it to you, get what you can't get out of bounds. We kick the field goal and win." Well, as you know, it didn't necessarily happen all that well. Right. They bloop kick it. Doug Christie kind of bloop kicked it. Lorenzo Neal catches it. He gives it to Frank. And to this day, man, I in 21 years, I haven't really spoken to Ike Bird about that moment. And he came up to field the bloop kick. So I'm not sure if he felt like all bets were off. They didn't squib it. So now we're just going to get what we can get and then try to get on the field and get in field goal range. I'm not sure why he decided to come up, but he came up and left me standing there alone. And Frank Wycheck, I don't know if he even knew who he was throwing it to at the time, threw it, let it go right down that line, and I caught it. Man, my job was the easiest, really. I just had to use what God gave me, and that was long legs and the ability to run. And I ran and I had smooth sailing, good escort into the end zone, man. And, you know.
But did you know it was going to count, though, Kevin?
Yeah, you know, honest, and to be honest, I didn't even think it was going to be close. It wasn't until I got home that evening when I saw the replay on ESPN that I was like, ooh, it was close. But the good news is when you read the rule book and you read the essence of what a lateral is, I absolutely believe it was lateral. Not even just because I'm part of the play and what it has done for me. And I truly believe it was a lateral by the definition of what a lateral is.
All right. So let's move on to the Super Bowl. So we go into the Super Bowl. Obviously, this was the greatest show on turf. You had Az Hakeem. You had also Kurt Warner. Isaac Bruce was on that team. Marshall Faulk. And the list goes on and on. They had a good defense, too. Talk about that game and then even go into that last play with that 1-yard miss.
Well, you know, we had played them earlier that year on a Halloween game, and we beat them. In fact, we dominated the first half, and we kind of coasted in the second half, and they made some adjustments. And I think we ended up winning that game 24-21 when we were up 21-0 at halftime. So we had a game plan, something they had never seen from a defense perspective anyway, where we pretty much dominated them. Coming into that Super Bowl, they were a hot team. In fact, they were close to losing the NFC Championship game, if I remember correctly, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But Ricky Proehl caught that touchdown at the end zone, the corner there, to send them into the Super Bowl. All that to say, we weren't scared of the greatest show on turf. We knew they were good. We knew they were explosive, but there wasn't that fear of playing them. So the game in itself, it was a little different. I think they made some adjustments from the first game that we probably weren't ready for. But when we adjusted, and we made our adjustments, the game became competitive, as you see. We went from being 16 down, I think it was, or whatever that was, and we made that comeback. And they got that one long big play in the second half, and that's the one that was the game winner to Isaac Bruce. But even still, the way our team was built that year, the vibe we had, the mental toughness that we had, I don't think anybody on that team would have thought we weren't going to score. I think every last one of us had that in our mind that we were going to go the length of the field and score. We were 89 yards away, and we just had that confidence. We had done it before. I think everyone in that huddle had that confidence. I believe everybody on the sideline had confidence we were going to score. So to come up short was tough. It was one of the toughest things I've had to do with personally, especially, I mean, athletically anyway, personally. It was stressful. As first time in my athletic career, I wasn't successful that I can even remember. I mean, I'm talking being in high school or whatever and have to hit a free throw to tie the game or win the game. I pretty much have always gotten it done up the biggest game of my life. So that was a little tough, but I tell you what, man, lessons in that. I mean, I had the Music City Miracle play that I wasn't supposed to be part of, in which my number was called, and I scored, got it done. And 3 weeks later, a play that I'm in the progression, I don't get it done. And that's one of the things I like to talk about with people is, you know, through it all, you know, you got to find, you know, time to overcome your adversity and persevere, because you don't ever know when your number is going to be called. Everything might be good and might be great, but there comes a moment, man, you're going to be challenged and you got to get up and dust yourself off and keep moving. I just remember after coming up short, laying there and looking up and the confetti's coming down, and I'm sitting there sulking. And then all this time, I had all these coaches used to tell me, you know, never let your opponent see you hurt. You get up, you shake your hand in grace, and you congratulate them, show sportsmanship, and you walk off, and you have a moment. And I don't know why, but at that moment, all those conversations just came to head, and I got up, shook a few hands, and I walked off and went and sat in the locker room. So, you know, it's a tough moment, and it's a rare moment. There's a lot of guys before me that never had a chance to get to that moment. There's a lot of guys even after me, 20 some odd years later, who still have it. And I'm fortunate enough to play in 2 Super Bowls, let alone be a part of one of the most impactful games ever, and to still have a one that's talked about 20 years later. I'm appreciative and humble by, but it is tough, man. It was tough, I should say. Not anymore. It's 20 years ago, but it was tough. It was tough to deal with, and I never got that elusive championship ring. Not everybody could be the Patriots. I don't know if you're a Patriots fan for being up there by Rhode Island, but
Yeah.
are you a Patriots
Well,
Jets?
not so much. Well, I am still a Patriots fan, but the
Yeah,
problem with the Patriots is when Brady was there, they gave him no weapons as far as wide receivers.
and
He
he still
just had
won.
he just had Edelman last year, and that was it. And then they expect the guy takes pay cuts, and so they can sign good players. And I blame that on Kraft and also on Belichick, that they don't
Yeah,
surround him. They let all these good players go. Say what you want about Antonio Brown, and he's got some problems, but he's with
yeah,
Tampa Bay now. That was Brady's guy. Brady wanted him with the Patriots, and I know he had some issues last year, but now he's kicking ass. He's finally learning the offense in Tampa, and I think they're a team to be reckoned with. You got Mike Evans there, Godwin there. He's got a lot of weapons, and he can still throw the long ball. And with that type of and if the running back Jones, if he's healthy, I think that team's going to be tough to beat. I know they lost to New Orleans twice, but third time could be a charm for Tampa Bay. And with that team kicking into gear, I mean, maybe you have a different opinion. I know you've watched more games probably up close than me, but I think that Brady's got a chance at winning the NFC.
yeah. I agree with that assessment. It's amazing to me when I think about Tom Brady, what he's accomplished in 20 years, and to not have, other than Randy Moss for a year or two,
Right.
Hall of Fame type receiver, and he's still as productive. Now, Gronkowski's borderline Hall of Famer, probably. The rings will help. He's got some big numbers, so he probably will get in. But other than that, Edelman is a very good receiver. I don't know if he'll make it to the Hall of Fame. I don't think he will, but
He's more like Welker
yeah,
was. He's like
they're good numbers, but I don't know if they'll be Hall of Famers. And he still is productive. He got a lot of guys paid, like the Welkers of the world. Welker was just another decent receiver until he went play with Tom
right.
Brady. Edelman the same way.
Well, he was nothing on the Dolphins when he was
Come
with
on,
the
man.
Dolphins. Yeah.
And so Tom Brady, he got a lot of guys paid, and it shows you the brilliance of him and his ability as a player and a leader.
Is he the best quarterback ever? What's your take on that? As being somebody that played against him and knowing football as well as you do, Kevin?
You know, I've had this conversation over 20 years, and it's hard for me to. My bias always goes to Peyton Manning, and part of that is we were drafted together. I've seen him work. I grew up with him, if you will, as far as going through the league. But it's and that's just personal bias. But if you look at the numbers, you look at the championships, you look at what Tom Brady did, as you mentioned, without that playmaker on the outside, other than that 1 year that they didn't win the Super Bowl and they lost to the Giants with Randy Moss. You look at it and his numbers. I mean, even Drew Brees, with his numbers being as phenomenal as you look at the playmakers he's had along those times. Now, there was a time when he was making guys better too, but he's also had some pretty stellar playmakers consistently. And Tom Brady, man, it's hard to not give him that nod. Joe Montana, a lot of people won't give him that. Joe Montana had Jerry Rice and John Taylor.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Brett Favre, we can go down the list of receivers Brett Favre have, including
Andre Rison was there at one point.
Come on, man. Yeah. So, and those are some stellar playmakers. So, it's hard not to give that nod to Tom Brady, man.
Since you're not playing and just a normal citizen, do you ever think of the past? Or are you more thinking about the future in your new role as a principal and trying to push these kids into, becoming the leaders of tomorrow?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think for me, being able to have plays and stuff that are still spoken about 20 years later, then it keeps me relevant to the younger generation of just coming to the NFL to watch and things of that nature. And it'll be something that's talked about. And that's humbling to think about. And I've said this over the years. Not everybody has Hall of Fame careers. I had a lot of injuries and my career was shortened. But I still have stuff that people speak on is very humbling and I'm appreciative of. But The adjustment period, man. I'm writing a book, and one of the things I talked about in the book I'm writing is, when you retire from the NFL, it's almost, or professional sports, and maybe even for entertainment, it's almost, I likened it to the 12-step process of overcoming an addiction. It's not, it's you go through denial, you go through depression, you go through acceptance, and you go through all the steps trying to figure out life after, because your life was so regimented and dictated to, you got up in the morning, you worked out, you watched film, you studied, you practiced, you watched more film, you worked out, you got treatment, you went to games, you played games, you got on the plane. You're like, your life is so regimented, and it's so structured, and your purpose, your focus every week, what it is. And then when that's taken away from you, and especially if you're fortunate enough to play in the pros, it'd be different in college maybe, because you go right to the workforce. But when that was your job, it was playing professional sports. There's an adjustment period, man. And like I said, I kind of liken it to this 12-step process of addiction. There's a point of depression and denial, and then you become accepted. And it's like, what am I going to do? I got to reinvent myself. Some guys do it better than others, as you've heard and seen. You've seen stories of some guys really struggle with it. Guys, most of us tend to get into coaching. I did as well. I tried to get into it. I've coached. I've done that. I tried to get into it professionally. But eventually, man, my path was led in a different direction. I went back to school, and one of the things I used to say was I wanted to be qualified because I wanted to be qualified, so I was justified. I wanted, because I knew some doors would open up for me because of who I am, or who I may be to somebody. And if I wasn't educated on what needed to be done, then it wasn't going to matter. I can go up there and just ruin the opportunity. And so that's why I started going back to school, and I learned something about myself. I actually learned that I like learning, and for 10 years before I went back to school the first time, I hadn't learned I hadn't been in that situation, other than I was learning how to get better at my job, which was football at the time. And you research different things, diets and workout plans, stuff like that. But that was easy, but when you got to learn stuff that's not your norm or your comfort zone, I learned that I loved learning. And so I got more versed in that aspect, and I continue to grow in this role. And and as I start learning more and more, and I wanted to have a bigger impact and widen my web a little more and more, I moved into the administration side of things, and it has worked well for me for the most part. And I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I don't miss the game, playing and coaching. But you know what? I get my fix sometimes. I coach my son's team. I, like you said, I do radio, and so I get my fix. But I'm a different person than I was in my 20s. I'm mid-40s now, midlife, and I'm trying to enjoy every moment. And this time during COVID, especially, man, time is not promised to anybody. Man, we're only promised so many minutes in a day, so many hours in a day, and it's up to us to take advantage and make the most of those times and those moments. And I try to keep that in mind anytime I get too far high or too far low, and just remember, man, this too shall pass, is what my grandmother used to say, and that's how I kind of feel.
What made you want to become a principal? Was it something, maybe, because you have kids now, something that, they did that made you want to, get into that? Or what made you want to become a principal in general?
Well, you know what? To answer that question, I'd be lying to say I had a legitimate answer. I mean, as I said, when I retired, I knew I wanted to be around kids or some capacity, and coaching seemed to be the most natural fit. Giving back to the game that had given me so much. I did that for a little while, and as I went back to school for leadership, I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll be an athletic director and a coach. And I thought, because I loved the business aspect of athletics and being able to be around all sports. And so that was kind of why I went to school to get my first master's degree. And then I got into education, and I started learning a little more. And then I was at the private school, so I got my second degree because I went back to public school. So I had to go and get another certification so I can teach public school. And I started being in the classroom and learning and seeing those aha moments from kids. And then I started coaching and moving up and become a coordinator, and then became a head coach, and I really enjoyed it. But then after my third or fourth season as a head coach, a gentleman reached out to me about moving into administration. And I wasn't necessarily just looking, but somebody, a friend of mine who had a similar path, said, you know, opportunities come and go, but will this one come back around? And, you know, I had these degrees, and I was like, you know what? There's an opportunity that may not come back around. So let me go use these degrees that I have, and let me go see what it is. I can always come back to coaching. I can always go back to teaching if I don't want to do it. And I got into it. I learned a lot. I kept learning. I enjoyed it. I loved the seat at the table I had. And I said, man, I'm gonna dig my heels in here and try to get better and grow from this perspective. And eventually I went back to school, got my doctorate, and then that led me to like the possibility of having my own school. And well, prior to that, before I got my degree, but I had those feelings of wanting my own school, and I want to embrace that challenge. And now I'm right in the middle of it, and I'm trying to be the best I can at it. And I have some goals, obviously, from a personal standpoint, but from a school standpoint that I want to realize and feel like I had an impact on the building. And we'll see how that works out. You know, COVID aside, it's going fairly well, but we'll see.
So can we talk about what makes a good principal? Do you have certain strategies that you've used and, you know, maybe that have worked in the past, or maybe that are working now, that maybe something that you learned in football that you can kind of apply toward kids in the academic realm?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, man, just knowing people and being relational. I think that's the biggest thing, and that's missing in just in life in general, is being relational. I think we're so guarded and so upset and got so much going on negative in the world that a lot of times we forget the relationship piece. And I think that's one of my strengths, if you will, is that I am relational, and I try to include everybody in, very collaborative in my conversations and in my leadership and thing. And I think people have embraced that, and they feel empowered to make decisions, feel empowered to do their job. And as long as that's that's how I always performed at my best. If I felt empowered to perform my level and I didn't feel like somebody was hovering over me, then I would be willing to go out there. Now I'm self-motivated, and this may be why I tend to lead that way, because I feel like everybody should be that way. You know, and so I think for me, leadership, you got to have a good pulse on your building, a good pulse on your team or your organization or your business, and be able to, if push came to shove, you can roll up your sleeves and dive right in with your people. And I think sometimes, and depending on situation, either educational, corporate world, or athletics, I think there's not always, a lot of times there's that separation between the leadership and the workforce, of the people doing the work, that sometimes the leaders forget, I used to be in that situation. And I try not to be like that. I try to remember I was once in that other seat, and I want to respect that other seat. I want to respect your time, because I know what it's like when people don't respect your time, or respect the work you do, and know that you are doing the bulk of the work. I just get to, you know, direct and maneuver pieces, and hopefully create an environment that everybody can be successful in. And I think that for me is key.
But I want to talk about coronavirus. We know that, you know, where I'm at in Florida, it's really going sky high and it's out of control. It's going out of control all around the country. How has coronavirus affected the school and the community that you are living in right now?
Well, we have some high numbers in the community, and I think that just the perception of it, when people see the numbers, that's why I don't look at them personally, because they'll drive you crazy. It's like watching the stock market. You can watch the stock market all day long, it doesn't do you any good. Their numbers are going to go up and down, and so you just, as long as you know that, just why study it. So, but the numbers are going up and down. They've been up for a little while, and they've come down a little bit now, and I think that is one of the things hard for me personally, and I can't speak to other principals, to navigate, is people's perception of what is out there in the world. Like, the people look at the numbers and everybody perceives it and looks at it a little differently. Some it doesn't bother, and then the others, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? You know, and for me, I just try to
But this affected your family personally. You know how this is. You know how serious this virus is. And I believe it's serious. I have asthma. I'm scared to death about it. But are
yeah,
you worried about a lot of these kids that unfortunately, maybe some of their parents don't think this is worth anything, but we have teachers that are in these schools that are, 40s, 50s, or 60s, or maybe they take care of their parents and that are elderly. And if those parents get sick, or even if they get sick and they have that pre-existing condition, they're dead. That's it. And there will be
yeah.
no teachers. So how is that working out? Are the kids really abiding to these safety protocols in the school? Are they giving you a tough time?
Yeah, no, for the most part, it's most people want to be in school, and here's the rules,
Yeah.
here's the policy in place, and I think most people try to follow those, and because they want to be here.
Mhm.
Um, you it's just a constant reminder. Hey, pull your mask up. Where's your mask at? Hey, make sure you guys are not facing each other at lunch. I mean, there's just a constant reminder, and you just have to do it. That's part of the process now. That's part of everything else we're dealing with right now. And you know, it's unfortunate, but it's a new normal that we're adjusting to and getting used to.
Okay. But is that the main safety precaution do you have? Is it obviously a lot of schools have taken, obviously we have the mask, the water fountains are not in use, obviously, because that could
Hmm.
create traction. Any other safety precautions rather you have in the school besides that stuff?
Yeah, we got several. I mean, the cafeteria, we've had to split up the grade levels in half
Mhm.
to create social distancing at lunch.
Right.
No lockers this year. We've got taking temperatures in certain areas, checkpoints, and screening kids as they come in every day. I mean, the abundance of precautions that is set forward by the CDC. And for us, we try to manage it and try to make it as normal as we can. I think the biggest thing is for us is uh, that battle of attrition and continue to hey, pull your mask up. Where's your mask at? Get your mask on. Hey, no, you can't talk like that. You guys are too close. Back away. Sit here. Those battles are like every day, because I
Mhm.
think even kids are getting fatigued by this now and
Right.
want to be back to normal. And so that's the biggest thing.
No issues with teachers that are, nervous or upset. Is it mostly in
Yeah,
person or is it online too?
no, we are in person, and
Okay.
we've been in person most of the year. I think we've been out, let's see, 10, 12, 14, 16 days of instruction. We've actually been from remote learning. Other than that, we've been in person. But yeah, everybody has anxiety about it. Not just everybody. A lot of people do have anxiety about it. But I will say this: people persevere, man. People have dug in and said, "Man, it is what it is. I'm gonna try to protect myself. Continue to um, promote social distancing and stay on kids about their habits and mask wearing and social distancing, and they come in every day. And I can say, I mean, I don't have data to back this up, but from my perspective, kids are not necessarily catching it at school. They're travel volleyball, cheerleading, hockey, sleepovers, and parties, and they're going elsewhere and they're getting. But as far as contact to contact within the school, I just haven't seen a lot of that, and so that's been good news and very, very refreshing to know. That people are doing the right things for the most part. If they feel like a kid is sick or ill, they're not sending them. They're informing us and letting us know, but they're not necessarily sending them here so they can infect the population. So it's been a challenging time, but I think everybody has adjusted very well.